right, welcome back. So we just covered this. We talked about how to start a discovery conversation with somebody who is actively exploring solutions like yours or solutions that are similar to yours. So now we are going to talk about how to start discovery with buyers that have either latent pain or active pain, but they're not yet exploring solutions. Okay, and the challenge that you typically need to solve for in discovery situations like this is you need to uncover pain, you need to develop that pain, but your buyer might be coming in a little bit cold, maybe a little bit resistant, and might not yet be willing to have that conversation, right? Sometimes it can feel like pulling teeth to try to get any meaningful answers out of them, or sometimes they might just blurt out in the middle of a discovery conversation due to a lack of patience, can you just show me the product? And then maybe we can decide whether or not this conversation makes sense. And as we all know, that is not going to be a sales cycle that's going to lead to a closed deal. So we're going to talk about how to solve for that. Like I said, often, and I want to emphasize it, not always, but often you are going to need to thaw out your buyer. You're going to need to warm them up, and you're going to need to earn the right to do meaningful discovery with them. And when I say meaningful discovery, what I mean by that is discovery about the problems that you solve and that matter to them, okay? It's not always as easy as it sounds to get people to open up about that. So there are 3 ways to start discovery with buyers that have latent pain or active pain, but are not actively exploring solutions. Number 1 is context-led questions. Okay, we're going to talk about that in a second. Number 2 is the discovery prompter technique. Also going to talk about that in a video lesson to come very quickly. And then number 3 is sometimes it's okay to just jump in and start asking about their top challenges in an area that you solve. Okay, it's okay to do that if you get the sense that your buyer is already warmed up and they're open-minded and they're willing to have a conversation. If that's the case, if that's your read on the situation, then skip some of the fancy techniques that I'm about to teach you because you're overcomplicating that discovery conversation. But in the vast majority of cases, you do need to warm up your buyer. But I do want to emphasize this warning, okay? Those first 2 techniques, the techniques you're going to learn in this lesson and the next one, context-led questions and the discovery prompter, those techniques serve a purpose. And that purpose is to warm up a cold buyer. Now, if your buyer is already warmed up to having a conversation, those techniques no longer serve a purpose. And so don't use them. Don't overcomplicate your discovery conversations if you don't have to do it. Okay, so the goal of the first 2 techniques, the one you're going to learn now, which is context-led questions, and the one you're going to learn in the next video lesson, which is the discovery prompter, they are designed to thaw out, to warm up your buyer, and to help you earn the right to ask problem-oriented questions in a way that does not feel generic or intrusive to them. So in this video lesson, we're first going to talk about context-led questions, what they are, why they're powerful, and exactly how to do that, including an exercise that we're going to end with so that you can start using this technique today. Okay, so context-led questions, what are these? Let's start with the definition. These are questions that are preceded, meaning something comes before the question, questions that are preceded by sharing an observation or an insight that's usually based on pre-call homework. And those observations and insights give your buyer context as to why you're asking the question. Okay, they put them in a certain direction. They prove that you've done some pre-call planning and homework, and they probably even signal that you have more business acumen than most salespeople they interact with. Okay, so it starts with you sharing an observation or an insight that gives context as to why you're asking the question. Now, the person that I know of that is best or the best in the world at this technique is Tim Ferriss. Okay, so Tim Ferriss, he's the author of multiple books, 4-Hour Workweek, among others, and he has a very popular podcast called The Tim Ferriss Show. And he is a world-class at this technique. He interviews some of the highest performing people from all walks of life on the planet. And what you'll never see Tim doing is just asking a trite question, right? It's not just the who, what, when, where, how. It is sharing an observation he has, sharing some context, and then asking the question, which triggers a far richer response from his interviewees. And so this is a transcript snippet from one of his interviews with LeBron James, the basketball player, and LeBron James's trainer. And you'll notice what this question looks like. He says, Mike, he's referring to LeBron James' trainer in this situation. He says, Mike, I'd love to dig into recovery and injury prevention. So LeBron, you're a bit of a unicorn in the sense that you've played more than, as I understand it, 50,000 minutes in your career. Most basketball players hit a wall and deteriorate after 40,000. So you're defying all predictions of player decline. So Mike, maybe you can give us a window into some of that. Could you walk us through some of the tools of the trade and the approaches that you use to help with recovery between games? Now, one of the things I want to call out here is a typical person would have just said, LeBron or Mike, tell me about your recovery process. And they would have probably exasperated a little bit and said, sure, and then answered the question, because it just kind of feels like a little bit like an interrogation, a little bit like a dig. But because Tim is sharing an observation, a very astute observation, and then using that as context as to why he's asking the question, tell me about your recovery process, he gets a far more engaged participant. And you can steal this exact same technique to get far more engaged buyers, right? Remember your cold buyers that are showing up to a discovery conversation. If you just ask them a typical question, they might feel a little bit exasperated. But if you ask a question of this style and your observation hits a hot button of theirs, now you're probably going to have a very rich discovery conversation. So let's start to bring this into how this could work for you, right? We just talked about how this shows up in podcasts. Now let's talk about how this shows up in sales conversations. So there are typically 3 areas that you can draw on for your context-led questions, for sharing your observation or point of view or insight. The first one is research and observations about the company that you're selling to, right? Your customer's company. The second one is research and observations about their industry. So not just their company, but the industry in which they're operating in. And then the third one is a little more broad, research and observations and insights about external factors that might be impacting their business. It could be the economy. It could be financing or venture capital drying up or the stock market or something like that. So company, industry, and other external factors are typically the 3 areas you're going to draw on. I'm going to give you 3 examples, one for each of these categories, and then we're going to transition into an exercise so that you can start to use this in your own business. So first example, we're going to draw from the first category, an observation about their specific company. And so this, I'm selling to a guy named John. It says, John, I'd love to start by talking about something I read on your company's recent press release. Okay, it mentioned your company is entering the sales engagement category and plans on competing in that space going forward. I'll make it clear why it's relevant for us to talk about this in a second, but do you mind if we start by talking about what factors drove the decision to enter that market? Okay, so in this situation, I'm probably selling to like a sales technology vendor. They recently decided they were going to compete in the sales engagement space, like Outreach, SalesLoft, and some of those other competitors. And I gave insight, an observation that I noticed they're doing that. And then I asked the question, what drove you to enter that? Assuming that's, like they're entering a problem space that I can solve. Now compare that to just tritely starting the discovery conversation with, so what drove you to get into the sales engagement space, right? You might get a good answer, but it can feel a little more taxing for your buyer to answer that, whereas sharing your observation before smooths things out, okay? It gets them far more engaged and likely to want to have a productive conversation with you. So let's look at example number 2 now. So the first one we looked at was industry, or company rather. Now let's look at sharing an observation about their industry at large. So this one sounds like this. Emily, I spent some time looking at the customer success technology industry before this call, right? That's what the space they play on, is the customer success industry. It seems like the category is evolving, where CSMs and the technology they use are now more focused on expansion rather than just preventing churn, right? It used to be just about preventing churn, and now we're starting to go into expanding customers. How are you seeing that show up in your world, and what kind of strain is that putting on your product team? Okay, so this is assuming I'm selling to a decision maker in the customer success technology space, and I probably sell some sort of technology that helps their product team move faster. Okay, so I'm asking about I'm not just sharing any observation, I'm sharing an observation that leads to talking about a problem that I can solve. Okay, one more example, and then we'll get into the exercise. Example 3 is drawing on broader external factors. Okay, so in this situation, we're selling to a head of sales who sells hiring-related software. Okay, so it sounds like this. Vanessa, maybe we can start here. So you're head of sales for a hiring software company, and the elephant in the room, as far as I can tell, is your market is hiring significantly less than they were a year ago, right? We're kind of in a recession right now. So I'm curious how you're handling that and what kind of changes you're considering making to your sales approach and just how that's showing up in your world and how you're handling it, right? That is far more powerful than just saying, Vanessa, tell me about the challenges you're facing when it comes to selling, right? So we're leading with an insight, an observation, a point of view that is based on research we've done before the call. And then when you ask your question, assuming your research and your insight hits the mark, which is a big if, right? You've got to get good at that skill. Now you're going to trigger a very rich, productive, pain and problem-based sales conversation. So there are 3 keys to success to making context-led questions work and to help you find business pain that money follows. Number 1 is you have to make it relevant to your problem area, right? You can't just share an insight and then some question. You might trigger a rich conversation, but if you're not asking something that somehow ties back to a problem you solve, then you're just giving away free consulting, right? You're having a productive conversation, but not in a way that's going to trigger a purchase down the road. Number 2, it is helpful to gain permission, right? So you'll see in some of the examples, I would say things, if it's okay with you, I would like to start here, right? Asking permission throughout your conversations is a great way to grease the wheels, right? To like get buy-in to conversations. And then number 3, the last thing to make these successful is make sure you don't get tunnel vision. It's very easy to ask about something specific, but your buyer might be thinking about something else completely. And so just make sure you are giving yourself permission to zoom out. And after a few minutes, if you sense you're talking about the wrong thing, say, let me just back up for a second. Is this the thing we should be talking about? Or did I miss the mark? And is there something else that's more top of mind? Okay, so just make sure you don't get tunnel vision and respect the fact that you could be at risk of getting tunnel vision easier when you ask context-led questions. Okay, let's get into an exercise and let's wrap up this lesson on context-led questions. You're probably used to the way we do exercises now. So number 1, choose an upcoming call, a new discovery call that you want to try this technique on. Number 2, plan out and write a context-led question based on either research you did about the company, the industry the company operates in, or other relevant external factors. And then finally, number 3, try it with your customer, then reflect and self-assess. So this is what the exercise file should look like. Go grab it. Step 1, choose that call. Step 2, write the context-led question that you're going to ask based on the research you've done. And notice the bolded text I have here, when in doubt, simplify. Okay, if this is your first time doing it, or even your first 10 times doing it, err on the side of simplifying it, right? Don't make it too complicated. It's easy to overcomplicate this technique. And then number 3, try it out, assess, maybe try it 2 or 3 times to really get the hang of it and build some muscle memory. And in that exercise document, fill out all this stuff, right? Write how it went, write what you think you did well, what didn't go so well, and how you can improve next time. So go do that exercise before you move on, and I'll see you in the next lesson on the discovery prompter.